Kia ora, everybody. Good afternoon and welcome to this resumption of deliberations meeting around the consultation on activities in public places. The meeting did start last Wednesday and we adjourned to give staff officers time to get legal advice on some possible changes to the content and also prepare a supplementary report, and that work has been done. So we're ready to get back underway today. My name is Aaron Stallard. I'm chairing this meeting and the panel, and joined by Councillors Matthew Benge and Campbell Rollo, and supported by our governance team, Robin and Arnold, and council officers. So I'll just get us started with a karakia. Oh, and technical issues with the live streaming. We are recording but not live streaming, so any gaffes there'll be a delay when you can issue press releases to apologise and so on, but it'll get there eventually. Okay, karakia. Tuia ki runga, tuia ki raro, tuia ki roto, tuia ki waho, tuia te haere tangata, ka rongo te po, ko rongo te ao, homie huie tai kie. So I would welcome council officers. Michelle's going to speak to the report and supplementary report, I believe. Welcome.
Thank you. Through the chair, you've referred to the supplementary report, which has been circulated to the panel, but if I could, I would just like to table that now. So the supplementary report has been prepared and deals with a few extra points which are listed in the report in section 4. There are no updates to the report. The only thing I would mention is that the main report and the supplementary report should be read together, and that the recommendations in the supplementary report take into account information provided in both the reports. So for today's meeting, the appropriate set of recommendations is in the supplementary report. Other than that, if I could take the reports as read and take any questions.
Great, thank you. And I was thinking, just to be a bit orderly, we might take questions in order of the points in section 4 of the supplementary report, just so we can deal with each issue at a time, if that's okay. So the first point in that section is matters for street stalls, and that was around consideration of competition with adjacent businesses, venues and so on. Are there any questions around that issue or that part of the report? No? Well, I'll just sort of clarify. So the wording is that, as a general rule, council would not interfere with the market, but at the same time it goes on to say that staff would work with an applicant to find a suitable location to avoid having similar products being sold from a stall in an existing shop. So if a person wanted to open a stall in a certain location and they really wanted to be on that site, there was a nearby shop with a similar product, what would happen in that case?
If I could perhaps call on my colleagues, either Ailish or Rebecca in the property team, to help with that one, please.
Through the chair, the current situation is that we would have a conversation with the intended new licence holder. We would consider whether the product was similar enough and whether there were any other locations that they could consider. At the end of the day, if that was the only location that they were interested in, we would enter into a licence with them, but we would take factors into account on a case-by-case basis. But would not make a decision that would be seen as interfering with the market.
Great, I think that's pretty clear, and I suspect we're happy with that. If we were going to, in a sense, interfere with the market, that's a whole new field that we'd have to discuss and so on. So that all sounds fine to me. If we can move on, perhaps we'll combine floppy signs and sandwich boards, including their location, their design, and so on. Any questions on those matters? Matthew? Yep. Councillor Bench.
Thank you. I see you've answered my question about the floppy signs by saying that we can't look at them because they weren't consulted on, but they were talked about in the consultation period. And so it's, I guess it's whether you are looking for a reason to stop something or whether you're looking for a reason to allow something. And I don't agree with that, to be honest. That it did come up. Floppy signs were mentioned.
Would you like just to clarify, because this is a legal matter, really, isn't it, about what we can and can't change at this stage? If you could just clarify that issue.
Yes, that's correct. We have included details on the decision-making scope in the supplementary report in section 5.1 through to 5.2. And this is to do with the legal constraints around decisions that council can make following consultation. If you like, our legal advisor is available to join the meeting. However, we would need to go into a public excluded session to take that advice.
Matthew, are you wanting to explore this further, whether that be just briefly outlining your concern or what you wanted to see considered, or would you wanting to get legal advice on this? Or are you happy with the explanation and we'll move on?
No, I'm not happy with the explanation. I feel it did come up. People talked about the floppy signs being whacked in the face by them and so forth. And I don't want to see that happening. But the reason for that is that the flags extend beyond their base. And normally the wind blows in a single direction, but it can blow in any direction. They can swing around it and hit people. And I couldn't see why they shouldn't be allowed if they stayed within the vertical limits of the base. What I don't want to do is totally restrict any innovation or artistic creativity that adds to the colour of our city. And I'd rather see a set of rules that allowed certain things, but didn't allow things which made it more difficult for people who are blind or low vision. So I'm not sure what the process is from here, to be honest, but I'm not happy with saying that it can't happen because it never came up. It did.
Officer Joubert, would you like to comment just on the procedural aspect of that? Even if it was mentioned, did we require a submitter to ask for something specific and so on? So where are we sitting with the fact it might have been mentioned perhaps, but there weren't specific solutions proposed in the way that Councillor Benj is proposing now. So what can we consider now or what can we not?
Through the chair, yes. So the key point there is whether a change that council or the panel would like to consider now that is different to that which was consulted on is actually based on feedback from a submitter. So that's the key point here. And whilst we did receive submissions from people about flags, there were no submissions that suggested a design change that might remedy the problem. And so that's why the advice is that a change to specify the design of floppy signs is considered out of scope.
Yeah, I'm satisfied with the explanation. Matthew,
Well, if legally we can't look at it, then we can't. I don't have any control over the law. My concern is that our town is getting bland because it's lacking people, and we are talking about making it even blander. Yes, I can only repeat what I said. I would rather there be a set of rules that people could work within, because innovation and creativity are great things, and people will come up with things that we haven't even thought of. And by being too simplistic in our way we stop things happening, stifles innovation. So I can't change the rules. So if the rules say that can't be done, it can't be done. We'll have to leave it.
thank you, Councillor Benj. Councillor Roller, would you like to question on sandwich boards or flags and so on?
Excuse me. My question, Officer Dubia, was around when this proposal was to happen. Do we have any? Do we give notice to the CBD, I guess, or the greater region around when the rules would become effective, or would that recommendation, if it's signed off on the 5th of September, be effective the first thing the very next day?
Through the chair, so our recommendations would include a specific date when the bylaw takes effect. At the minute, we're suggesting the 12th of September because the city amenity bylaw expires on the 11th of September. And so that's the date that we're looking at the moment.
And just a quick sub, if I may, Councillor Stallard, on that is, will there be any sort of follow-on discussion with the greater region in terms of a letter drop or such, advising them of the potential rule changes?
Absolutely. Once the final decision has been made by council, we will publicise the results, and there'll probably be some comms about it as well. We'll also be relying on our partners in the city centre, so Uniquely Nelson, for example, and the City Centre Business Forum to help spread the word. But certainly if it became clear that a letter drop was needed, then that is something that we would do as well.
Cool. And am I able to carry on, Aaron?
Yes.
Yeah, sure. In terms of any potential changes that may then receive complaints from people walking up and down the town, or out in Stoke Tahuna, would the expectation be that there's a bit of a leniency period around the new rule changes, or would it be council's expectation that once the rules are set in stone, if you're breaching them, you're going to be caught by breaching them?
Through the chair, as part of council's compliance strategy, the first step would always be one of raising awareness and educating. So we certainly would make sure that people understood the rules as a first step. Yeah.
Great. Just two quick questions from me. TDC are currently undertaking a similar consultation, I believe. A couple of clauses in their proposal is that, for example, the council reserves the right to dictate the exact location of the placement of boards, prioritising pedestrian safety, and also that the council retains the right to remove any board deemed a nuisance. Do we have similar kind of safeguards with what we're going ahead with potentially?
If council decided to adopt the proposal as it was in the statement of proposal, then location of boards would be dealt with under the plan. So that's how council would gain that action. In terms of the nuisance, the bylaw, part of the bylaw's purpose is to minimise and protect the public against nuisance. So that is written in as part of the purpose of the bylaw.
Okay, so there are some safeguards. If there's a known problematic placement of a sandwich board, there would be some scope for staff to speak to the business owner and just resolve that issue.
Yes, and that's probably how things would happen, you know, on a sort of first step, to just have a conversation initially.
Thank you. And the second question, it was proposed a change in terms of sandwich board design whereby there's required to be some element of it below 150 millimetres above the ground surface. I wonder if you could just run through the details of that, explain it to us, and then where you're at, because I did send through a question that wondered if the wording was clear enough about what's required and why.
Through the chair, thank you, Councillor Benj, also for raising this. So this suggestion came through from submitter number 40, which is the Blind Low Vision New Zealand organisation, and included in their submission was a link to a guide which is called Clearing Our Way, and that sets out best practice guidelines for making environments more accessible. And the guide includes that placing objects or signs that protrude onto the continuous accessible path of travel should be avoided. But where there are things that protrude, it is suggested that every protruding item should have an element within 150 millimetres of the ground. And this is so that people who use white canes are able to detect that item. We looked at perhaps whether we should make it clearer that it's not, you know, any strange or new design element. It is just some element of the board that should be within 150 millimetres, and that accords with the Waka Kotahi guidelines as well, in that it is some element of the protruding item that must be within 150 millimetres of the ground.
So this does apply to sandwich boards. And I guess it's trying to stop the case where we have a structure with a narrow base that widens further up. So is our wording clear enough? Because to my mind, if we had that case, a structure with a narrow base that widens upwards, there is something within 150 millimetres of the ground surface because there's the base of it. But the essential thing is that it's equal, it comes out as far as the sort of maximum width up above. Is that clearly sort of conveyed in the wording that we propose?
I take your point, and it makes sense what you're saying. And we've essentially followed the wording exactly as it is in the Waka Kotahi's guidelines, and we haven't strayed from that. But it does make sense. Your suggestion makes sense, and so we could look at clarifying that. In terms of adding a definition, that raises its own problems, because if we make it too specific, then we run the risk of leaving something out by accident. And so it would probably be best to include something in the bylaw clause itself.
So at this stage, in a practical sense, are we able to do that after this meeting?
Through the chair, it may be best to sort of take a short adjournment so that we can work on some words and then come back to the meeting and have that as a change that's been proposed through this meeting. And then you'll see in recommendation 3 of the supplementary report, the chair of the panel as well as the GM for environmental management then has the ability to make those changes in the documents before they go to council on the 5th of September.
Okay, I think that's good advice. So if we just adjourn the meeting now for 10 minutes or so, and we'll work on that and then we'll resume. So the meeting's adjourned till just after 2 o'clock, a couple of minutes after 2. Thank you. officers and staff, we have got the new wording out there that just clarifies there's been no change, just a clarification to make sure the instructions are clear for people about the requirements so that a low vision or blind person with a white cane will actually encounter the obstacle at ground level where the cane is. All right, we're continuing with questions. Councillor Benj.
Just the clarification, that's what we're talking about, is all these things being on the roadside of the footpath and there be a 1.8 metre clear gap.
Through the chair, yes, that's correct. So that's the recommendation. That's the detail of all of that is set out in your main report, and that report explains that based on feedback we received on the proposal, we're suggesting that sandwich boards be all located on the curbside of the pavement, and that the clearway space be 1.8 metres.
Thank you.
Sure, Campbell.
Thanks, Michelle. Just a quick sup on that. And I'll use an example where there's a dairy out Stokeway that have a gas bottle refill right adjacent to their building. Is there going to be anything affecting that gas bottle container or cage, I guess you call it, against the building now that sandwich boards could potentially be on the curbside? Will they need any consent or anything to have those situated there?
Through the chair, the change in this bylaw relates only to sandwich boards, so other matters would be caught by this.
Okay, we can move on to the next items that were subject to further consideration, which is around clause 6.10 in the bylaw, sleeping in public places and definition of occupy. Any questions on those issues? No, we're good on that. Any other questions on any topic relevant to the meeting? All right, you're first.
Just on the proposed license fee schedule, I note one of the things that TDC is doing, and we should never follow what another council does just because we saw it in the media, but one of the things they're doing is looking at discounted outdoor dining if it's a smoke or vape free area. Did we, I know we didn't have any submissions that I could see on that, but is that anything that we considered through our fees and charges?
Through the chair, I'm going to look to my colleague Ailish to help with that one.
So, sorry, through the chair. So that was something that was considered through the policy development, but council is looking, would need to consider whether they have a overarching smoke-free, vape-free policy. So we thought it wasn't the appropriate time to put something in this policy without an overarching policy or strategy on that subject.
Okay, thanks. And just a quick sup on that, is there any intention of looking at that sort of policy in the very near future, given a neighbouring council may be doing that in their jurisdiction?
So through the chair, I think that would need to be part of a wider policy prioritisation discussion. So that could be considered through that discussion.
All right, I think we've finished with questions. So thanks so much for your time. Do we have a mover and a seconder? Yep. So the motions are moved by Councillor Benj.
Oh, maybe a second.
Seconded by Councillor Rollo. And would you like to speak first, Councillor Benj?
Probably two comments. One, I'm worried about stifling innovation. Our city, this city, has a history of being an artistic centre of New Zealand. And as I said before, we're not the town that has all the second shops like Otaki and Levin. You know, towns make a name for themselves by certain things. Our town is artistic and the outdoors. And I did not want to stifle artisticness, and I hope that we haven't done that. The second point I want to make is that we get things coming back to council and we're told that it was an unintended consequence. I don't want to see us setting something where there are unintended consequences. An unintended consequence is simply something that wasn't thought through properly. And I don't want this, particularly to do with sandwich boards, to paint a picture that we've made some big clearway down the side of the buildings, because we haven't. I'm happy with what we've done, but down the sides of the buildings are still power boxes, downpipes, road signs. There's a lot of road signs on the top side of the footpaths. Telco boxes, pipes protecting telco boxes, bollards, a lot of them in the middle of the footpath, rubbish bins, lampposts, gas boxes, building designs which stick out. We haven't made some big clearway. I hope that in doing this, we don't speed up the traffic for the blind and low vision along the side of the building, and then we end up with accidents where they walk into the things I've just mentioned. So I hope we haven't done that as an unintended consequence, because it's there to see right now. I see you shaking your head and you're saying you're okay, and you've told me you're okay because these things don't move, and that people with blind and low visions have a map in their head and they like it to stay that way. They don't want surprises. So hopefully that is okay. That's all I've got to say.
Thank you, Matthew. Councillor Rollo.
Thank you, Aaron. And I think for me, it's when I put a question during the hearings, can you have sandwich boards in an accessible city? And it's something that's really resonated with me through this whole process, which I've enjoyed with you two on the hearing panel, is actually you can have sandwich boards in an accessible city, but it all comes down to making sure you police them. And it's all well and good to have rules in the world, but if you don't police them, then there's no point in having rules. And so I think as we move forward from here, we've now set a clear pathway of what we're wanting to achieve with sandwich boards. They are staying, they're going to the curb, and we've got a rule that hopefully the media will pick up and share far and wide of what the rules actually are now, and make sure that we do have an accessible city. And when there are rules that are getting breached around where they are or how many there are or how big they are, we do actually take on board the complaints that come in, and we make sure that they're policed in a way that it's not here to divide people, but actually make sure we're focusing on what we want to be, and that's Wakatu Nelson as the most accessible city in New Zealand. Now, I think that the whole thing with this whole process, which has been extremely, I guess, frustrating, is we're looking at so many different pieces of the world. We're actually trying to make outdoor dining easier and more exciting in a time where our CBD probably needs all the help it can get. And we've put some ideas out there and some costs that are going to make sure that hospitality places can really get out there and utilise parts of the town that might not necessarily be used. And so I'm sure that, you know, as we leave from here, the whole discussion will be, well, can we still have a sandwich board or can we not? But if you actually read the whole recommendation that's coming out there, is actually we're also making sure that we get behind hospitality, local business, and also our disability sector that need it the most. So hopefully these recommendations, when they go back to council, are focused and those ideas that may have been shared elsewhere to, you know, changed in a way that what we've come up with here, I think with the work of the staff and us on a hearing panel, we've got a good solution for everyone in the town. So thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Roller. My thoughts, firstly, a big thank you to council officers, staff for guiding this work, getting to where we are, and also to all the submitters who, including those that turned up in person. It does make a big difference to see people in here, what they have to say about these issues. So thank you to all those people who are involved. Two issues for me that deserve comment. Firstly, the sandwich boards. To me, the starting point for that is that footpaths are public spaces for the safe movement of people. And we should consider other activities on footpaths and so on. That's fine. There's good reasons for doing that, but we shouldn't move away from that primary purpose of footpaths. They should be public, they should be safe, and they should enable movement. And that's the position that Queenstown Lakes District Council has taken, and their position is quite simple. They don't allow sandwich boards on footpaths, and they say that something along the lines of, our position is that footpaths are for pedestrians. People on foot, also people who need to use wheelchair or mobility scooters, or people who are pushing prams and so on. We have heard from some members of the community who say that the more that there are obstacles on the footpath, the less they feel safe, the less they are able to move around, and they simply avoid some areas. So clearly, we do have a problem that we are losing that primary role of a footpath to some degree. And I think it's our job to sort of minimise that risk and that disturbance. We've also heard from the business community, and we had the results of a survey and so on, and we appreciate that feedback, that many members of the business community consider sandwich boards are important to the health and the well-being of their business. And that council should be helping businesses, which we all agree with, I'm sure. And council does, I think, make great efforts to engage with and assist the business community, whether that be through facilitating the City Centre Business Forum, funding Uniquely Nelson, funding the Nelson Regional Development Agency, Nelson Business Tasman Trust, free parking, Bridge to Better, and so on and so on. So I think in any of these considerations when we are helping business, we should consider just how meaningful that help is, the cost, and if there are any sort of side effects for other members of the community who might be affected. And that's the case, I think, with the sandwich boards. There's no doubt that business owners want to have that advertising on the footpath. There's also problems with mobility or access that creates for some members of our community. So it is a good thing that we're moving the sandwich boards away from the shop side of the footpath, because we've been told that people with low vision or who are blind, who use a walking cane, they are taught to actually tap along the sides of the building. So that's a good step. I do fear that by moving the sandwich boards to the road side of the footpath, we are generating a whole new set of people, who are going to find difficulties with these structures. And I just think of people who are parking, whether it's on the angle parking on Trafalgar or the parallel parking on Sandbridge Street, and you have a baby or a young child in the back seat, and you get out and you go to pick up that child or the baby, and your vision, you're carrying them in front of you, and then you have to move down the narrow space between cars up onto the footpath, or you've got a pram out of the back of your car and you're trying to take that down the space, And the first thing that's there as you step up onto the curb is a structure in your way. Parallel parking, if the sandwich board is in the area in the middle of a park, you're opening your doors onto it. If it's in the area between adjacent parks, then you're walking into it. Angle parking, again, if the sandwich board is in the middle of the park and you have a car with the nose that goes further beyond the wheels, and you might be pushing that sandwich board further into the footpath and so on. So I do hope this all goes well and there's no problems, but I just see potential for many new problems with having sandwich boards on the curbs on the roadside of the footpath. So my personal view, I don't support having sandwich boards on footpaths. Just returning to that initial priority for me, that it is the public space for safe movement. My colleagues do support it, so I will be voting in support of the motions before us. But yeah, my personal view is that we should. I prefer the stance we took when we went out for consultation of not allowed unless a resource consent is gained. Second point I'd like to touch on is, of course, 6.10 around sleeping in the city centres, and I think we have an improvement with what we've come up with, talking about occupying rather than sleeping and defining occupying. I think there were some very valid concerns raised by some of the submitters, or one in particular around potentially violating the Bill of Rights, and acknowledging that this clause in the bylaw does not address the whole raft of underlying factors around homelessness and vulnerable people, and how we take care of people who are suffering mental illness and so on. So it's a good thing that we have that clarifying note about the first response when someone is homeless, that we will seek assistance from the relevant agencies and so on. But I do think we need to be careful that we don't head in the direction of saying it's a crime to be homeless, or that we say that someone who is without a home is actually a nuisance. But I think we're in a good place with the amendments that we have, and certainly trust our staff to use their discretion and make sure we look after people's well-being. Right, well, that's it from me. I think we're ready to vote, unless, Matthew, you wanted to write a reply.
Oh, fine.
You're fine.
Yes.
So I'll move those motions before us. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against say no. They are moved. And I think we're ready to close. I can close this with a kariki. Tia kina te rangi, te kina te hou, te kina te moanga, te kina te awa, te kina te moana, te kina te whaia o te ao, te kina papatuanuku, homie uie pakie. Thank you, everybody.